Hi, it's Nicola, and today we're talking chapters. 3 questions answered about book chapters. Today's show is brought to you by the new Forever Young Autobiography Publishing Services and the free Structure Success video training. And stay with me till the end because I'll have more about these very soon. If you're new to the show, welcome. It's where we learn to write life stories for family and friends so that unique memories live on. And I'd be really thankful if you could follow, subscribe and like the show. During coronavirus quarantine and lockdown, quite a few of my family and friends have been doing jigsaws or puzzles. And they've been doing the small ones. I've been doing those with the kids, and there's been some really epic take over the kitchen table kind of puzzles. And people have been getting quite addicted to them. And it made me think, when we're writing our autobiography, memoir, biography or other life story project, our chapters are kind of a bit like puzzle pieces. We're putting these together so we get the full big picture or the big story about a life. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of chapters, and I've got 3 questions to answer for you today. The first one is, what is the importance of chapters? Why do we need chapters? So just imagine that we have a 40,000 word book. It's just completely page after page, one solid chunk of text. There's no breaks, there's no chapters at all. How much of a chore would it be to read this? It's almost overwhelming. Of course we need chapters. They're essential for any book because, number one, they help your reader pace themselves through the book. And it helps them also guide them through your story. So it's kind of a twofold reasons of why we need chapters. So we're going to guide our reader, but also pace our reader through our work. Another reason I think it's great is if you're writing, you can actually pace your writing by spacing it out with chapters. And also when you come to the editing phase, having chapters and editing chapter by chapter is really helpful, so you can sort of eat that elephant spoon by spoon. So that was question number 1. The second question is, what's the average length of a book chapter? This is a really great question, and it's a question that new writers often ask. So the answer really boils down to what sort of category of book are you writing. If you're writing a fiction book, for example, the Writer's Digest says for fiction books, you're talking about a good work would be 80,000 words to 89,000 words, just as a range there. And say, for example, you had 10 to 12 chapters in that book. That's that good range. Then you're going to have probably around 6.5 or 6,600 words per chapter, all the way up to somewhere around 8,900 words per chapter as an average. But then we're going to come to non-fiction books, which includes life stories. And to be honest, I've seen lots of different figures for this one. And they kind of fall into the range of 35,000 words all the way up to 75,000 words and above. So really, how long's a piece of string with this kind of question? But say in that range, 35,000 to 75,000, again, you say had 10 chapters. You're talking chapters that are roughly 3,500 words to 7,500 words. So no strict rules. I know that's disappointing, but there's just basic ranges. And if you're self-publishing, well, you do get to decide, so keep that in mind. So to finish up today's show, got the last question for you, and that is, how do we make chapters? It's all good and well to know how important they are and what's the average word length, but how do we make them? The first thing I want to address here is that if you do have an average length for your chapters, say we have a 50,000 word non-fiction memoir with 10 chapters of roughly 5,000 words per chapter, they're not all going to be, your chapters are not all going to be 5,000 words. So don't think you have to have a word count exactly per chapter. The first chapter might be 6,100 words. The second might be, a little bit less, 4,000 words. And the third chapter, 5,500. So it is impossible to make them very neat to the word. Each chapter is not going to be the same. You've got a little bit of leeway. Okay, so putting that aside, that's your average chapter count. There's some other ways to split up your chapters in your book. Now I'm thinking, first of all, chronologically, time-wise. You might think, okay, I'm going to do it by the decades of my life. So we'll have a chapter for my, say, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, etc. Or you could do by calendar decades, sort of 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, 80s, and so forth. Or you might have phases of your life, your childhood, your young adult life, middle life, etc. So that's one idea, splitting it up according to time. The second thing you can do is settings. Now, settings are places where your story takes place. You can logically split that up. For example, maybe you moved house or you moved town or you went to live overseas. There's some natural chapter breaks in your story. The third idea you can use for chapter breaks is according to your plot, or what's going on, what's the actual substance, what's happening in your story. For example, you might have a chapter break when you leave home to go to university, or you have a chapter break when you get married and you leave home, or you move in with your partner and start your own family. Maybe you have a period of illness in your life. That could be its own chapter, or a retirement part of your book. So think about what's happening in the greatest scheme of your plot within your big story. And finally, probably what's most important is to always keep your reader in mind. You want them to go from the start, the first chapter, all the way to the end. And if you've got a really big chunky chapter, you want to make it easy for your reader. Think about dividing that into two so that then they can pace themselves and go through the story without feeling like they're labouring through a big heavy section. And likewise, if you've got two smaller chapters, think about how you can creatively combine those. If it makes sense, put those together. But I think the most important thing is it is your book, and books come in all shapes and sizes, small chapters, big chapters, few chapters, lots of chapters. But these are just some ideas for you to keep in mind when you're planning, writing, editing, and publishing your book. So that's pretty much how to make chapters and master chapter length. I hope it gives you some clarity and confidence to write and finish chapters that your audience will really want to read. So to recap, we talked about why chapters are important, the average chapter length, which is kind of a two-sided story there. It can have an average, but it is up to ultimately the author or the publisher. And finally, how do we make chapters? So if you'd like to know more, I've got all this detail plus more over at my website, which is foreveryoungautobiographies.com/chapters. So please go over and leave me a comment too. Put something in the comments for me. How are you dividing your book into chapters? Are you going to use times, settings, plot, or something else? I'd love to hear about it. So please leave me a comment or go to foreveryoungautobiographies.com/contact. Earlier I mentioned the new Forever Young Autobiographies publishing service, and this has just started, and I'm really quite excited because I haven't done this before, and this is where I'm available as a professional life story coach writer to help you write your stories, whether that's for a loved one or to write them for you. So I could do interviews, interview transcripts, writing, short stories, features or books, and then there's the whole editing and publishing phases that I can help you with too. And if you're signed up to my weekly emails, then I'm going to offer you 1 hour free of my services. So it's a really good deal. It's running for the month of September. And if you'd like to find out more and book some time with me to work on your life story projects, you can head to foreveryoungautobiographies.com/publishing services. So make sure you get the hour free in September. And talking of freebies, if you haven't tried it, the Structure Success video training is really helpful, especially if you are starting out to plan your chapters for your book. This free training will help you come up with a rough outline for your chapters. And it is a really good exercise or a really good training to revisit if you're in the editing phase where you really are locking those chapters into stone. That's the final part, and you want to double check that you've got it just so. So you can sign up for that one completely free. Put in your email at foreveryoungautobiographies.com/structure-success-sign-up. I'll be back again really soon with another topic. So I'll be thankful if you could follow, subscribe and like the show. And don't forget, I'm over at Facebook too. I share things there a few times a week. Just search for Forever Young Autobiographies. And until then, everyone, happy writing.